The fire you buried now lights the stars. The Velari Empire had not fallen. It had knelt. And from that day on, no one dared mock the name of Earth again. The stars were quieter now, not silent, just reverent. In the weeks that followed the reckoning, the Velari Empire did not collapse. It didn't need to. Something deeper happened. Something worse, in the eyes of those who once believed themselves untouchable. They changed. No laws were passed. No treaties signed. No human occupation was necessary, because when a species learns, it was never truly in control, never at the patia. Top of the chain, it begins to correct itself instinctively. Velari military academies rewrote their entire doctrine in a single solar cycle. History books were recalled, rewritten, and redistributed, now with full chapters titled Terran Silence and the Awakening of Earth. The High Senate rebranded itself the Concord of Voices. They no longer called themselves a supreme. Not after what they saw in the sky, not after Elias, Cain. Not after the girl. She was no longer the half-blood or the human stain. Her name was now taught in classrooms. Ea Cain, first of the Starbound Directive, the next evolution of diplomacy, command, and respect. She didn't ask for titles. She never gave speeches. And yet her image, calm, poised, violet eyes watching from beneath raven dark hair, became the symbol of the turning age. It was etched into coins, screens, and sensor walls. Not out of worship. Out of reminder. On the former throne world of Huskir Primus, a lone Velari historian stood in the ruins of the Imperial Archive. The place had not been bombed. It had been emptied. Not a single weapon had been used, and yet the knowledge stored there had been rendered obsolete overnight. He activated a voice record drone and began to speak, slowly, with great care. They came not as saviors, not as monsters, but as something worse. A pause. Proof. He stepped past a collapsed terminal, brushing off dust, glancing up toward the sky visible through the shattered dome. Proof that everything we built, everything we believed, was based on a lie of absence. We thought them extinct, but they were simply watching. He turned to the drone, eyes heavy. And now that they have reminded us who they are, we can no longer ignore the truth. His voice trembled slightly. Humanity is not gone. Humanity was never gone. They were waiting until we gave them a reason. Back on the Galactic Academy grounds, the students trained harder now, but differently. The simulations had been rewritten. By Terran code, no longer were cadets taught to dominate. They were taught to adapt, to observe, to restrain. One student, a young insectoid from the Rollick species, hesitated after a failed tactical run. He approached Ea after class, nervous, clicking mandibles, switching. Director Kane, he asked, voice chittering. May I ask something? Ea nodded. Why didn't they destroy us? She considered the question for a long moment, then. Because we're not the enemy. Ignorance is. The student tilted his head. She added, My father could have wiped your fleets from the stars, but he didn't come for revenge. He came because you hurt his child. And he needed you to understand what humans protect. She turned her gaze to the horizon, where a golden Terran ship hovered silently above the city, like a watchtower. We don't burn what we can teach. And so they learned. Across dozens of systems, messages arrived without names, signatures, or return paths, only strings of ancient Earth code. Some unlocked new technologies. Some dismantled corrupt governance structures silently, exposing secret records. Others simply played music. Real, human music. Jazz in the Meraki sector. Gregorian chant on Cadal 9. Beethoven in the hearts of imperial citadels. The Velari began, calling it the gentle storm. It was not a war. It was an education. And humanity was the only teacher. 1 year later, Elias Cain stood alone at the edge of a mountain overlook on Earth. The real Earth, its skies clean, its oceans gleaming silver beneath orbital cities, grown like coral reefs. He watched as his daughter approached across the soft grass. She's beautiful again, Aya said, standing beside him. She never stopped being. Elias replied. Aya looked to the stars above. They still fear us, he nodded. Good. She didn't smile, neither did he, but there was peace between them. Deep, earned quiet. Will you go back into the dark? She asked. He sighed. I think it's time they learned on their own. We've reminded them. They'll tell the stories now. She turned to him. And us? He looked at her, his face lined by time and consequence. You are the story now. In the years that followed, the galaxy spoke of humans not as myths, but as inevitabilities. Every major species taught their young the new proverb, do not mistake silence for absence. And never, ever harm a human child, because somewhere out there, among the stars, humanity still watched, still listened, still waited. And when the time came, they would act again. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for something far more terrifying, for justice. And the galaxy would remember. Always. Inside the vault, the spear began to spin, slow at first. Then faster. Valari tech priests screamed warnings. Power levels were exceeding tolerance. Control panels melted, but the Emperor only smiled. It doesn't matter, he said. It's too late. The cores awakened. The spear will fire in 20 cycles. And it would have. If not for what happened next. The walls of the chamber peeled open, not exploded. Peeled. Like paper curling in firelight. And Elias Kane stepped through. His body glowed faintly. His eyes burned with violet gold light. The tech priests backed away. One of them dropped to his knees. The Emperor snarled, You are nothing, human. Your tricks won't stop this. Elias tilted his head. Tricks? He asked softly. You really think this was all me? He turned his hand palm up. Above it, a small sphere materialized, white hot and pulsing with layered encryption. The key. To the world spear. Valari. Eyes widened. How did you get that? Elias smiled. You never understood what you stole. He tossed the key into the air, and it dissolved. The world spear stopped spinning. Its energy dropped to zero. Alarms screamed. Failsafes kicked in. But the spear was no longer responding. Impossible. The Emperor whispered. No, Elias said. I built it. The silence was immediate. Every Valari in the chamber froze, because in that moment, they understood the second, deeper truth. The world spear hadn't been their last defense. It had been a leash, placed there by humans. Centuries ago. So they could monitor the Valari, manipulate their development, control the shape of their ambition without ever needing to draw a weapon. The Valari hadn't been rulers. They had been test subjects. Elias turned to leave. The Emperor screamed and drew a blade, lunging with all his fury. Elias didn't flinch. A pulse of invisible force blasted the Emperor backward, pinning him to the far wall. I came to retrieve my daughter, Elias said. She was the only warning you'd ever get. Then he vanished. No flash. No sound. Just gone. Back on the academy steps, Aya opened her eyes. The air was warm again. Calm. Her classmates stood in silent shock, staring at her as if they'd never really seen her before. A teacher tried to speak, then dropped to one knee. The others followed. Not out of fear, out of understanding. Humanity was not extinct. It had evolved. The sky burned gold, not with fire, but thousands of encrypted light beams cutting across space like blades. Valari observatories strained to track them, their sensors screaming as bandwidths collapsed under the weight of the impossible. Every orbiting satellite turned its lens toward the stars and caught a glimpse of movement. Not ships. Not weapons. Fleets. Human fleets. They didn't decloak. They emerged. Not through warp gates, not by propulsion, but as if phasing in from a layer of reality the Valari had never conceived of. Dozens, then hundreds of dark silent vessels slipped into view like shadows against flame. Some had no identifiable Engines. Others pulsed like heartbeats, held aloft by physics that shouldn't exist, and all of them bore the same symbol, a human eye. Open. Watching. Waiting. Vel AR. I. Defense Command lost control in under 30 seconds. Planetary grids collapsed. Targeting systems rebooted into foreign code. Fleet admiral ships found their commands hijacked by systems that refused to recognize. Velari Authority. One ship's AI simply declared, "Override complete. You are no longer in control." In the Academy courtyard, students and staff stood frozen. Eyes tilted skyward. Then the sky shifted. And Elias Kane arrived, this time. Not alone. He descended like a god, flanked by 2 human warframes, fluid constructs taller than towers, gleaming with silver skin and surrounded by micro-drones that moved like a swarm of intelligent dust. They didn't land. They hovered just above the plaza, humming with presence. Aya stood calmly beneath them. She wasn't the frightened half-breed anymore. She was something more. Something other. The two met in the center of the courtyard, father and daughter, and exchanged no words. They didn't need to. Velari Command issued a final order from the throne ship. Total engagement. All remaining fighters were to strike the invaders. They never got the chance. The moment weapon systems powered up, they were dismantled mid-flight, torn apart in the sky by invisible threads. Missiles twisted midair and reversed course. Entire cruisers disassembled, each piece rearranged into orbiting rings of useless debris. There was no resistance, only humiliation. In orbit, a Velari dreadnought attempted to self-destruct before it could be taken. The detonation code was denied. Request denied. This ship is under Terran stewardship. Then the ship's I played an old Earth tune. Beethoven. Symphony. No. 7. Movement 2. And began docking procedures on its own. On the ground, Elias turned to the largest group of gathered Velari officers. Scholars, military minds. Some were trembling. Others clenched fists in defiance. He addressed them all. "You pushed us out of history. Erased us from the books. Thought if we were forgotten, we'd stay gone." His voice was soft, calm, but humanity doesn't disappear. He gestured to the sky, where the fleets now formed a silent ring around the planet. "We adapt." A young Velari officer stepped forward, trembling but defiant. "This is tyranny." Aya turned, eyes sharp. "No," she said. "This is consequence." The girl who'd once been shoved into lockers now stood before a fleet that could erase planets with thought alone, and they listened to her. From orbit, new signals bloomed across star charts, Velari territories blinking offline as Terran satellites activated dormant code in their infrastructure. One after another, regions long believed independent of Terran influence fell into silence. The Velari's map of the galaxy twisted, like a mirror cracking. This wasn't war. It was redefinition. Reckoning not fought with weapons, but with presence. Velari ambassadors scrambled to initiate surrender. But there was no one to surrender to, no authority, no flag, no singular Terran leader. There was only a message broadcast through every channel. "You were warned. Humanity remembers." In the capital plaza of the Velari homeworld, the people watched as a monument rose, not built, summoned. A spire of shifting alloys and soft light, formed from debris and dust, grown rather than constructed. At its top, a simple sculpture, a human and a child, hand in hand. Not as conquerors. As guardians. But the message was clear: never again. Inside the academy, Aya returned to the learning chamber. She walked to the very center where the high-caste students used to sit, took the seat once denied her, and spoke to the assembled class. "You were taught that humanity was a story," she said. "An extinct animal, a warning, but now you know better." The room was silent. They left the galaxy once, not in fear, in disappointment. They hoped you would grow. You didn't. She placed her hand on the table, and it lit beneath her fingers with Terran code. "You won't get another chance." Above her, The sky was no longer Valari blue. It glowed deep gold, laced with Terran patterns. And on every Valari world, on every screen, in every mind, one final message played. They thought they could recover. Valari strategists convened emergency summits. New tactical models were generated, old war plans updated, simulations launched at hyperspeed. The common wisdom was that humanity had fired its opening salvo, a psychological one, and would now wait. That gave the Valari time to adapt, to respond. They were wrong. The second wave began before the first meeting, adjourned. Not a fleet, not an army, a signal. It wasn't intercepted. It wasn't jammed. Because it didn't travel. It existed. One moment the Valari central archives were intact. Every strategic document, every personnel file, every classified blueprint carefully encrypted and housed in triple-tiered data vaults. Next moment, they weren't. Every file, every byte was replaced with the same blinking message. You were warned. Valari High Command reeled. They tried to restore from backups, but even those had been rewritten centuries ago. And everyone bore the same hidden tag, signed in code traced back to a Terran encryption pattern last seen in the 2600s. The implication was horrifying. The infiltration hadn't begun recently. It had begun before the Valari even knew humanity was watching. In the academy, Aya sat at the center of the amphitheater. No one dared sit near her now. The empty space around her grew wider each day. Not out of scorn, but fear. Even the instructors deferred to her quietly, cautiously. The younger students had begun calling her Starbound behind her back, a legend. Even while breathing, she still didn't speak much. But when she did, things changed. The academy, Aya, once aloof, robotic, now answered her in a warm voice with a faint Terran accent. Learning modules that were locked to all other species opened for her. One day she walked into the simulation chamber and it simply shut down for everyone else. That same day, she solved a starship battle matrix meant only for master tacticians. Not in an hour, not in a minute. In 6 seconds. It wasn't just fear that spread now, it was awe. Meanwhile, Elias Kane moved through Valari space like a wraith. He didn't conquer worlds. He unplugged them, one by one. Outer Rim Valari colonies reported system-wide blackouts. Medical bays stopped mid-surgery. Communication towers collapsed into silence. Artificial gravity reversed for seconds, long enough to remind them that control could be taken away at will. No deaths, no explosions, just a reminder. You're not in charge anymore. Valari military commanders began rotating encryption protocols every 10 minutes. They deployed AI firewalls, blacklisted every Earth-related variable they could find, and began redesigning system architecture to purge ancient human code. It didn't work. The more they resisted, the deeper the corruption went. Even the throne, ship seat of the Valari Emperor, found its lights flickering, its command matrix rebooting, itself in the middle of an imperial address. They couldn't adapt. Every time they thought they had found the pattern, it shifted. Every human move was already 10 steps ahead. Some began to whisper of an ancient Terran doctrine once dismissed as madness. The Chaos Doctrine. Humanity's military philosophy was never about superiority. It was about unpredictability, about breaking the board, not playing the game. It didn't rely on numbers or strength. It relied on minds that refused to follow logic. And the Valari, bound by their own brilliant precision, could not comprehend it. In desperation, they launched the Hegemon Protocol, a mass deployment of elite cyber commandos trained to trace, isolate, and delete the source of the interference. 3,000 agents entered human-infected systems. One returned. His mind was gone. He spoke only one sentence, over and over, eyes wide and unblinking. They're already here. The Valari Senate began fracturing. A faction rose demanding a peace envoy. Another called for total extermination of human bloodlines, starting with Ea. They brought the motion to the academy floor, seeking symbolic control. They didn't realize Iya was already watching. She stood calmly as the vote commenced. Before they could finish, the room dimmed. A hologram of Elias Kane appeared above them, taller than life, eyes like twin stormfronts. "You tried to take her again," he said softly. Every senator froze. "You still believe you can control the narrative? That a vote will save you?" He paused. "You forget what we are." And then the lights went out. Not just in the academy, across the entire planet. A full planetary blackout. 5 billion Valari stared into sudden darkness and saw only the stars. The first time in centuries, the Empire felt vulnerable. When the lights returned 2 minutes later, the message was clear. Humanity was not reclaiming power. They were demonstrating restraint. Valari could not win, but they didn't know that. Yet, they still believed they had one final option, a weapon. Ancient and forbidden, buried deep beneath the core of their capital moon. A myth of last resort, they called it. The World Spear. And they were about to awaken it, because desperation was louder than reason, and they still thought they had something. Humanity feared. They were wrong. The chamber housing the World Spear had not been opened in 3,000 cycles. Buried beneath the capital moon of Haskir Primus, its access was sealed with 7 layers of quantum-locked genetic authentication. Only the Valari High Command knew of its existence. Even fewer believed it was real. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a contingency. A last breath forged in the age before the Valari Empire became a superpower. Designed to pierce entire star systems. Meant to destroy ideas as much as infrastructure. The Emperor himself descended into the vault to activate it. The air grew colder with each step. The silence thick with ancient warnings. Behind him, 2 of his most loyal tacticians hesitated before the final door. "My lord," one said carefully, "we may still negotiate." "The girl, she is not the threat," the Emperor growled. "She is the beacon. Her father is the signal. The others, they are the storm." He placed his hand on the activation panel. The door hissed open, and there it was, the World Spear, a long, obsidian spike suspended in a grav cradle, humming with unreadable energy. It didn't look like Valari technology, because it wasn't. It had been taken, salvaged from the ruins of an ancient Terran black site centuries ago, before Earth fell silent. Even then, they had not understood it, but they had feared it. Now they would use it. Above the moon, fleets realigned. Power cells across the Empire were rerouted to the vault systems. Atmospheric filters shut down in nearby cities to preserve energy for the spear. Across the stars, lights dimmed. And the World Spear awoke. It pulsed once slow and cold-like. The heartbeat of a buried god. At the academy, Aya felt it instantly. She was in the middle of a silent corridor, walking alone, when the world shivered. The walls moaned quietly. The air went dense. She froze. "They're doing it," she whispered. "They found it." The lights above her flickered. Then a voice echoed through her mind, not from speakers, not from her implant, but through her own neural resonance. "Aya, they've activated it. I'm coming." Her father's voice, but different this time, colder, sharper, layered. She closed her eyes. And for the first time, she saw. Not with her eyes, but with the data thread running through her bloodstream. Her human DNA had been modified at birth, bonded to something older than Earth's nations. A technology that had no name. A legacy designed not to fight, but to end wars before they began. In the skies above the academy, the air shimmered, then split. The crow's wake reappeared. No warning, no approach vector. One moment, nothing. The next, the ship stood in orbit again, doors already open. Elias Kane stepped out in free fall. No suit, no tether. His body was wrapped in armor of shifting living metal. It molded around his limbs as if grown, not built. Each step he took across nothingness carved glowing lines in space behind him. The Valari scrambled fighters. They launched nukes, energy bolts, plasma lances. None made contact. They all simply vanished mid-air. Some were returned gently, like toys tossed back by an amused elder. One fighter reversed its own fire path and disintegrated in flight, and Elias kept walking. He landed on the moon's surface. And then he began running toward the world spear. They did not return. No signal, no screams, no traces. They simply vanished. The Valari called it a massacre. But Iya knew better. They hadn't been killed. They had been erased. The next day, the ship finally spoke. Not with voice or broadcast, with images projected across every screen, every slab, every retinal HUD in the Academy. Images of Earth, not in ruin, but reborn. Towering forests, skies filled with stars and stormbirds. Megastructures wrapped around mountains. Cities that pulsed with light and greenery. Their buildings grown rather than built. And people. Humans. Not extinct. Not broken. Thriving. Laughing. Training. Watching. The comma. Projections ended with a final image. A man standing at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a sea of clouds. Armor worn but gleaming, face sharp with age and fire. A human who had survived the centuries and learned. Elias Kane, Yaz's father. His voice came next, calm, level. "You have bullied my daughter," he said. Around the Academy, hearts froze. "You treated her like prey, because you thought humanity was gone, weak, extinct." A pause. "You were wrong." Every Valari system flickered. Gravity briefly failed. Air processors halted, then restarted. In the silence that followed, the final statement echoed louder than any explosion. "She is not alone. And we are not gone." From that moment, things began to change. Doors that always responded to Valari DNA began hesitating around Aya. The AI assistant in the library once, uncooperative, now deferred to her. Simulations glitched when she entered. The chambers, battle algorithms reset. Some refused to run at all. No one understood why. The administrators blamed system faults. Students whispered of sabotage. But a few, the clever ones, began to wonder, was she doing it? Or was something responding to her? One night, a drone meant to patrol her dorm corridor hovered in front of her door. It chirped once, then spun mid-air and gently nudged her forehead, like a dog greeting its master. The next day, it was gone, retracted, disassembled, ordered destroyed. Too late. The Empire had dismissed Earth as a failed species. A warning, but now, the Valari were beginning to realize something far worse. They hadn't forgotten humanity, they had ignored them, and in that ignorance, they'd allowed something to evolve in the dark. Something watching, something listening. They came for him at dawn. 12 warframes tall, silver-armored constructs piloted by the best of Valaris. Elite enforcers descended from the upper levels like hounds loosed from chains. They moved with mechanical precision, iron pikes charged, grav boots humming as they surrounded the ship. The ship didn't react. It remained still. Unarmed, unimpressed. From the command tower, Admiral Cirrus barked the order. Extract the anomaly. Detain the human. The warframes advanced, weapons raised. The ship responded. Finally. Not with violence. With data. One by one, the warframes stopped. Mid-step, mid-breath, mid-command. Then they collapsed, not exploded. Not shredded. Collapsed. Their systems melted. From the inside, limbs folding in on themselves as their pilot screamed, then went silent. Across the Academy, emergency systems rebooted. Power grids surged. And then, everywhere at once, every display screen, wall interface, and visual implant flickered with the same phrase, written in sharp Terran glyphs. "We asked to be left alone." The Valari Empire had long believed it was the pinnacle of galactic evolution, technologically supreme. militarily unmatched, strategically flawless. They were wrong, and it started to show. The moment the warframes fell, Aya changed. She stood taller in the learning chamber, her posture no longer guarded. When one of her bullies flinched at her glance, she didn't look away. She stepped forward, calm, controlled. A single word left her lips in a language no one recognized. The lights overhead shattered. The instructor who'd been ignoring her since term began, Tavorin, tried to regain order. But his voice cracked when he addressed her, trembling in a way no one had seen before. What are you?" She looked at him, not with hatred, but with quiet knowing. "I'm what comes next," she said. Outside, the ship's hull shimmered, and a ramp extended from its base. A figure emerged. He wasn't what the Valari expected. He didn't wear armor of gold, or robes of command. No regalia, no guards. Just simple dark clothes, boots worn by age and war, and a long coat that fluttered in the windless air. His presence was like gravity. He walked as if nothing could stand in his way, not because he had strength, but because he knew he would never need to use it. He stepped into the center of the plaza and stopped. No fanfare, no flourish. Then, without ceremony, he looked up, directly into the nearest surveillance lens, and smiled. The Emperor of the Valari Empire, watching from his throne ship in orbit, leaned forward. "Bring him to me," he said, but the order never reached its target. Every comm system between the throne ship and the Academy went dark. Kane raised a small object, no larger than a coin, and pressed it once. Instantly, a ripple spread across the sky. The grid collapsed. Not crashed, not broken. Deactivated. Planetary shields flickered and vanished. Communications across 12 systems dropped offline. Surveillance drones powered down mid-flight and crashed to the Earth. It was like watching the nervous system of a giant beast fail in real time. Panic gripped the Academy. But Elias Kane didn't move. He simply raised his voice calm, sure, terrifying. "You thought we died," he said. "You hoped we did. Because you couldn't imagine a galaxy where humans still watched, still listened." He gestured to the ship behind him. "This is the Crow's Wake. It's not a warship. It's a message. The first of many." He turned slowly, speaking to the air, to every terrified Valari, every trembling student, every hidden admiral. "We didn't go extinct. We evolved. We didn't fight your war. We prepared for the next one." Someone from the crowd found their voice. A student, barely older than Ia. "Why now? Why come back now?" Elias looked toward the learning chamber, where Aya stood framed in the shattered light. "Because you hurt my daughter." The words were simple, but they struck like missiles. Back in the command tower, Admiral Cirrus stared at the cracked data feeds. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "Humanity doesn't have this kind of technology. He didn't finish. One of his officers, young, quiet, diligent, turned to him and whispered, "What if they always did?" The question echoed through the chamber like a curse, because in that moment, the Valari realized what had been hidden for centuries. The humans didn't disappear. They infiltrated. They seeded code into Valari systems during early trade agreements. They learned Valari languages, studied their tactics, mapped their psychological profiles. Then they vanished intentionally into the dark, not as cowards, as planners. And now, the first move had been made. Ia stepped from the Academy doors, walking calmly toward her father. The crowd parted without a word. She reached him, stood beside him, took his hand. He looked down at her, pride softening his hardened expression. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded. "They're not," she said, and with that, Elias Kane activated the second device. From the shadows of space, dozens of black ships flickered into existence, just for a moment, then vanished again, as if laughing at the Pavi, as if laughing at the laws of detection. Not an invasion, a warning. The Valari had made a mistake, a grave one, and now, too late, they were beginning to understand. You don't bully the child of a ghost. Empire, you don't poke the ashes of a sleeping fire. Because one day the fire wakes up. She was just a girl with gray skin and glassy violet eyes, sitting alone at the far edge of the learning chamber. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the polished blackstone floor. Around her, laughter echoed like cold. Metal scraping, glass sharp, cruel, unrelenting. "Don't touch her," one of the boys sneered, his plum-colored crest twitching in disgust. "She might infect you with her human filth." Another added with a snort, "Her father was a beast, earthspawn. They used to eat each other, didn't they?" Aya said nothing. She never did. Not when they knocked her tray off the mess table. Not when they locked her in the gravity field chamber until her bones ached from compression. Not even when a teacher suggested her very presence was a charity. Experiment. It was easier this way, quieter, safer. The Valari Empire didn't like noise unless it came from them. To speak out was to draw attention. To draw attention was to invite correction, punishment, re-education. She kept her silence. Like armor. The Galactic Academy floated in the obsidian reaches between stars, a cathedral of knowledge and conquest. Only the best of the best were permitted entry. Scions of noble houses, genetically refined diplomats, war-burned tacticians. And Ye, half Valari, half human, was none of those things. Her mother had been a Valari scientist, brilliant and ambitious, who disappeared shortly after Aya's birth. No one spoke of her. Her father was human. And to the Valari, that was a mark worse than shame. It was history's punchline. Humanity had been a footnote in the galactic annals. A species too stubborn, too emotional, too chaotic to last. Their last transmission centuries ago was unintelligible static, a death rattle heard and forgotten. The prevailing belief was that Earth had turned on itself, burned its skies and oceans, then vanished. The Valari told their young that humans had been a failed experiment in intelligence, a cautionary tale carved into galactic memory. Aya, unfortunately, was a living reminder. She took the taunts, the kicks, the static shocks. They couldn't break her, though they tried. On the worst days, she'd hum softly to herself, a tune no one else recognized. It was haunting, strange, human. One instructor, a rigid old pureblood named Tavorin, once paused mid-sentence when he heard her humming. His eyes flickered, like something in the tune had touched a long-buried fear. He shook it off quickly, snarling a reprimand. But he didn't come near her again. That was the first time anyone in the academy looked at her with something other than contempt. It was subtle, but it was there. Still, no one noticed the signs. Not when the lights in Ia's chamber flickered oddly in the evenings. Not when the Academy's planetary defense grid briefly went offline for 3.2 seconds. The moment she turned 13. Not even when a senior cadet reported seeing her floating in zero grav without gear, her body thrumming with unexplainable magnetic currents. That report was buried so deep it might as well have never existed. They didn't see the pieces falling into place because they didn't believe there were any pieces. She was a half-breed mistake, a curiosity at best, an embarrassment at worst. Until the sky cracked. On an otherwise unremarkable day cycle, with students reciting battle theory and instructors droning about conquest logistics, an unauthorized ship breached Academy airspace, no transponder signal. No ID, no propulsion wake. The Central Command hub panicked. They scrambled patrol drones, locked down corridors, initiated emergency lockdown sequences, but nothing stopped the ship. It didn't land. It descended. Like a shadow made of metal and fire, it settled into the plaza with the indifference of something that had no fear of being challenged. It was sleek, jagged, and dark. The kind of ship that felt like a threat just by existing. Students pressed against the windows. Some instructors shouted. Others whispered. Aya stood still. The laughter around her had stopped. Someone finally asked, voice trembling, "What is that thing?" Aya turned calmly, her violet eyes catching the light like twin stars. "That," she said softly, "is my father." And for the first time since her arrival, no one said a word. The ship didn't open its doors right away. It simply sat there silent, unmoving, a matte black leviathan crouched in the plaza like it owned the air. Its design defied Velari understanding. There were no visible engines, no signal emissions, not even heat signatures. It was as if it were carved from void itself. Across the academy, lockdown sirens wailed like frightened animals. Cadets scattered through the corridors, eyes wide, training forgotten. Teachers barked commands while summoning emergency tactical programs. Drones hovered at the perimeter, weapons armed, but none dared approach the vessel. It wasn't fear that stopped them, not yet. It was confusion. Velari's supremacy was built on precision, understanding, control. This ship, this thing, defied all three. By the second hour, the first technical analysis came back. Impossible alloys, outer hull density. That couldn't exist under standard galactic physics. The AI concluded it was a fake. A fabrication. A threat designed to deceive, not deliver. And yet, it remained. Waiting. Watching. Inside the learning chamber, no one looked at Aya anymore. They stared around her, as if she had become radioactive, untouchable. A few students who had tormented her the day before now avoided her gaze like it might burn. Instructor Tavorin entered briskly, data slab in hand, face pale and drawn. He fixed his eyes on her like he was trying to measure the distance between a snake and its strike. "What is this? A test from your human parentage?" he asked, voice tightly controlled. Aya met his stare with calm stillness. "No," she said. "It's a message," he scoffed. "From whom?" She glanced out the viewport at the ship, which had begun to hum deep low, like the growl of some long-buried god. "From Earth," she whispered. At that word, several students gasped. One even stumbled backward. No one said Earth aloud anymore. It was taboo, a superstition, like summoning a ghost. But the Velari Empire didn't believe in ghosts. They believed in dominance. That night, the Grand Council convened via encrypted holograms. Fleet Admiral Cirrus insisted it was a rogue artifact, a distraction, maybe a sleeper weapon seeded by one of the lesser fringe empires. He ordered orbital bombardment. The order failed. The moment the orbital cannons powered up, they shut down. Mid-charge. Not destroyed. Disabled. Their systems rebooted and played a single Earth melody, a soft piano refrain that hadn't been heard in nearly 400 years. No one knew how the ship had accessed Velari military systems. No one admitted. What they feared, that it didn't need to. That it was already inside. After that, no further orders were issued. Instead, a delegation was formed. 12 of the most elite minds in Velari science and diplomacy. They approached the ship slowly, in perfect formation, robes glistening under. The twin suns. Their movements were graceful, calculated. They reached the ship's perimeter. It opened for them, not with fanfare, not with drama. With silence, a single seam appeared along the hull, widening into a doorway that glowed with soft blue light. The delegation paused, then entered.